to Shedale. Hello, everyone. Let's start healing. I'm Adrienne Murchison, and welcome to episode 19. Can you believe it? We're at episode 19 of the Let's Start Healing podcast. And I just greeted you with Shedale, which is hello in Tibetan. You know what? We have more in common than we think. And what we have in common can change the world. I want to invite you to like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram, and know that our podcast is growing. We are now available on Spotify, as well as Apple Podcasts and our podcast YouTube channel. Also, send me an email. Let me know what you think about this podcast. Maybe you know someone who would be really interesting to be featured on the podcast. Send me an email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. So our guest today, I am really excited. You are going to like her. Her name is Barbie Baptiste Gardner. She's in Los Angeles, and she wrote a book on her journey through divorce. And she is a very inspiring woman. Her book is called He Loved Me, I Loved Me More. And it's not only her story, it is a compilation of short stories of other people who have been through divorce or are on that journey, on that path now. And it's a book that really, if you've been in a relationship of any kind and you've been through some turmoil and ups and downs in a romantic relationship, you're going to be able to relate to these stories. And Barbie, I really appreciate how transparent and open she is in our conversation, sharing with us how she actually picked herself up through the lows, how she came to a place of being able to prioritize herself in the equation of things. It's really a really nice conversation. We chatted on the phone, so the audio is a bit different than normal, but I cannot wait for you to meet Barbie. So let's meet her, let's get started, and let's start healing. Welcome, Barbie.
Hi, thank you for having me, Adrienne.
Oh, thank you for joining Let's Start Healing podcast, and congratulations on your book.
Thank you so much. This is so surreal for me. I'm, first time author, so this is amazing that this is actually come to fruition. I'm so excited.
Wow, yeah, it has to be really gratifying. And so a lot of the book is you had contributors who share their experiences. Did you interview them, or how did that work?
Well, what it is whenever you're in any space, when you are married, when you're a parent, and in my case, experiencing divorce, then you are in the loop of life stories, because those are a lot of times the people that you know, and those are shared experiences. So some of them actually are stories from even before I was experiencing my own divorce. Some some of them are my stories, and some of them are people who I know or know of. And some of them, they're all inspired by true stories, but some of the stories are also, I would see, a shared experience.
Yeah.
So that's why I say they're inspired by true stories, because it might be blended from several people who are having the same experience.
Right. And so you call the book, I want you to describe the book for our listeners, but you call it it's a girlfriend who gets your pain. A girlfriend who gets your pain. So describe the book for us.
Okay, well, the book is called He Loved Me, I Love Me More.
Uh-huh.
And when I chose that title, I'm seeing that a lot of people think because it says that it's my memoir, and it's not.
Right. Uh-huh.
Which, I'm an open book myself. I'm fine with that, but that's not what the book is.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, some of my stories are in the book, but the book is because when I was going through divorce, and I'm actually still going through divorce, it's been 3 years for me,
Mm-hmm.
but I was seeing that there was so much shame and just people who were embarrassed and just didn't want to share their experiences. And of course, you don't have to, air your dirty laundry. No one has to do that. But as far as concealing it,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a lot of hurt involved with divorce. And for me, divorce is a choice. It's a choice just the same way that marriage is a choice.
Mm-hmm.
It's nothing to be ashamed of. If you're making the healthiest decision for your family, you shouldn't be scrutinized or feel that even by yourself, that you failed
Mm-hmm.
because you're making this choice. If it's going to be a better life for you and for your family, then that's what is most important.
Mm-hmm.
The stigma of divorce is a bad thing, and by God and by everyone who that you made wrong decisions.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the case. Life happens. I'm a different person today than I was years ago. And that also happens to our partners.
Mm-hmm.
So just being able to be healthy, and the thing that's really ironic is when I started this journey with this book, I started to hear from people who even made the choice of getting married because of what they felt they should do. It kind of works both ways. And then, of course, down the line, you're going to have the situation of should we get divorced? Because in the beginning, maybe that wasn't the right person for you, but you felt that you should be getting married
Mm-hmm.
at this time in life. And it's those shoulds that get us in trouble.
Right,
so
right.
that is the basis for me writing the book, where I myself had an amazing, and still do have an amazing support group
Mm-hmm.
with family and friends. But your divorce is your divorce the same way your marriage is your marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And I just feel like divorce has been kind of put in, like a really small little box of this thing, but really it's really not that, because if you think about it, you're closing one part of your life, and at the same time, you're creating a brand new life simultaneously, and that's major.
That is major. When you say that it's in a box, do you mean like it's compartmentalized and it shouldn't be, because it's something that should be acknowledged and blended in with the new life that you're starting? Is that what you meant by that?
I feel like, honestly, there's two different viewpoints on divorce. Of course, people who've experienced it, and I talked about that in the book, and people who haven't experienced and think that it is something that it really isn't. Meaning, you could have an experience where people think because you're getting divorced, you hate your ex. You're at war. And that's just not true. Not every day. It really, of course, you have a separate life from your ex. And of course, my divorce is not, her divorce or his divorce. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying that I feel as if it kind of has been, divorce is this bad thing. So that's what I mean by that box.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's people who are divorcing who are best friends. Good friends, there's people who are divorcing who are completely indifferent to one another, who don't talk to each other anymore. There's people who, just like a marriage, one day they're good, one day they're not so good. Because, our own journey, our own individual journey affects everything in our lives. So, if you have someone who is, the huge thing with divorce is the money. So if you have one person who has their own relationship with money and they feel as if their partner is sabotaging them and hurting them by trying to, quote unquote, get this money. And then the other person feels as if we were a team and things need to be divided. So because of your own feeling about money, of what is owed to you or what you're feeling as if is being taken from you, that can absolutely affect your divorce. Right.
Wow.
I know I went off on tangent,
no,
Adrian. I hope I answered your question.
You did. I think that now I have never been married. So I think that for someone who's single or for maybe people who are married and haven't experienced divorce personally, I mean, I definitely know many people who are divorced, but having not been through that, I think that maybe I wasn't aware of just, I want to say what was coming to me kind of suffering in silence, just the struggle. And really, even I had met someone one time and he was in mediation, and I understood what he was telling me, and he was really depressed. But now I'm feeling even more of a sense just listening to what you just said, just of how difficult that process is. Are you comfortable sharing your journey, how long you were married, and just, what the shift was from being happy and content to when things didn't work out, and how you got to where you are today?
Absolutely. Yes. And like I said, I'm in a transparent space for myself. So the only areas where I'm guarded in any kind of way is, I don't feel as if that's fair to place that on people who are in my family or involved with me, that same transparency that they didn't ask for. So I can tell you from a space for myself, with my own marriage. I absolutely fell in love with my soon to be ex-husband, and that's another thing I feel that might be a misconception. I don't regret that part of my life at all. It wasn't wasted time. I was blessed with my two stepsons, and in addition to my three sons through marriage. And I can't imagine life without them. But as far as my own journey and why divorce I felt was the best option for myself was I did not feel as if the connection for my ex and I didn't feel, to be quite honest, that he wanted to be married anymore. And I know that people can put their hands on certain things in a marriage. He did this, she did this. But because I've been on this journey of self-development that was inspired at the end of my marriage and continued through this divorce period, I can absolutely say that the person that I am now, I absolutely contributed to the breakdown of my marriage as well, where I wouldn't have seen that before.
Right.
I wouldn't have seen that before. But I really don't think that this is about pointing the finger
Right.
anyway,
Mm-hmm.
because I believe that I'm on the path that I'm supposed to be on. I was
Mm-hmm.
married for 7 years before we were separated. So now it's been 10 years. Oh my goodness. It's been 10 years. And as far as the reason that I say in the book or on the cover that it's unexpected blessings, I feel like for myself, because of divorce, when I was a married woman, I was with my children like 7 days a week.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an entrepreneur, and I feel as though I didn't get to explore that part of myself because I was literally so exhausted.
Right.
And so much of myself was being mechanical
Mm-hmm.
in my marriage. And I was trying to do what I feel like I wasn't living.
Right.
I wasn't connected.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I loved my children. Yes, I loved my husband. But I feel as though I wasn't connected with myself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that connection is a gift from God, because now I share custody with their father. And in that space, when I get to have the time for myself,
Uh-huh.
I get to rejuvenate myself.
Exactly.
And I get to look forward. I feel like I date my sons. I feel like when I have time with them, it is so special. And I mean, that doesn't mean I don't get exhausted. That's one of the things about this book. I wanted to continue to be transparent. I'm not acting as if divorce is the holy grail of happiness.
Mm-hmm.
It's life, and life is whatever you make it. I want to get married again,
Mm-hmm.
but because of my own journey, it will look different.
So I think when we had talked before, you mentioned sort of being a mom. I think in a marriage, being a mom, it's hard to, does guilt come with thinking about yourself sometimes? Like you mentioned that you were disconnected from yourself, and you're a natural entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur. Is that accurate?
It is. Guilt comes, and like what I said as far as what I felt as though I did wrong. Honestly, I don't think that I was being selfish. And what that can look like when you're married is feeling as though you're being taken advantage of. But we're all accountable for what we stand up for and say
Mm-hmm.
is okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't say I absolutely have to have this, because if I had, things might have looked differently.
Uh-huh.
They really might have. So it's not fair for me to say this didn't happen and it's my ex's fault when maybe I wasn't clear, because I wasn't clear with myself.
Right.
Because I thought this is what I should be doing as a wife and a mother.
Right.
And it depleted me. I was burned out. So,
well, have you and your soon to be ex-husband, have you had an opportunity to have a heart-to-heart talk about the things you're sharing?
I'd say on a lot of different things we have.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the other blessing with divorce. It doesn't happen for everyone. I know some people who, unfortunately, they had a relationship where they were very connected as husband and wife, but then when they get divorced, one person feels so scorned that they only text message, they don't talk at all. I feel like in my journey, I have had the discussion with my ex on certain things where we both had a revelation, like, you know what, I realized that you did this during marriage And I appreciate that you did that, because now I'm doing it.
Right,
and
right.
It's hard. Like it is. And, he said the same to me, where you have those moments
right.
where you realize, because, that's kind of a natural thing when you don't have to do a role. And now you have to step into the role, and you're like, you know what? I kind of understand why you did or said what you did. Now I understand now.
How old are your boys? 9,
7, and 6.
Okay.
And then I have grown man stepsons that are that's a shame. When you get to a certain age, you forget it. They're in their 20s and 30s.
Right.
Yeah.
So, what were some of the low times that you're comfortable sharing? That and I know there were times when you felt your life might have felt out of control. What were some of those times, and what was the turning point that brought you out of that?
For me, I think that everyone has their different thing, and it part of me felt guilty for feeling like the love part of my relationship was not my breakdown part. And I was like, well, that even made me question like my level of love. And I was like, of course I did love my ex-husband, but for me, my low point was the financial. It really was. And that stems from how I see myself as an entrepreneur, a businesswoman, and how I judge my value of, I completely started over in every way during my divorce. And I think that that's I'd say a lot of women, but I won't discount men who experience that as well.
Started over in what sense?
Financially. Started over.
Meaning you had to grow. You had to grow your base of income, or what do you?
Well, because for me specifically, I didn't have a 9-to-5 job when I was getting my divorce, and then I had attorneys and attorneys' fees.
Right.
So as soon as that's a whole new ballpark. And everyone does it different. Some people don't use attorneys, like you said. Someone can mediate, and it's still a fee with that, but it's a different kind of fee. But for me, because I didn't have a job during that time, it made me start completely over in my life. And I even actually have a story specifically about that. I don't usually say who the stories are about in the book, but during the holidays, it was just really on my heart that someone might be going through a hard time. And the name of the story in the book is called Dollar Dollar Bill, Y'all. And in that story, it's talking about, it's a little bit funny, but it's talking about the dollar store and how, as a married woman, I would go to the dollar store, but I was picky. It was like for little extra things for my kids. It wasn't like a staple store. But to stretch the money during that time, it became way more than that. And when I shared that story on my Instagram page, I had women that were, it was women who were sending me messages and saying thank you, because they had gone through that same type of struggle or were currently experiencing it. So that's the thing with all of this, I feel, is there's a lot of, it's only me.
Yeah.
It's only me that's experiencing.
That's why I was thinking that suffering in silence was coming to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just feeling, I must feel alone. So this is enlightening for me, and I think a lot of people, that we don't know what someone else is going through a lot of times. We may think that we're over here and we have this problem, and then there's someone going through like what you're describing. So, wow. Well, what was were you relying on your faith? What was it that got you through, or is getting you through?
Well, absolutely. My faith is, that's a whole nother story. Yes, absolutely. My faith got me through. And it's a constant reminder to me that we try to control and do so much. Of course, that's the natural thing. And then when I hit the wall and I was just like, I don't know what else to do. I got on my knees, and I always feel as if God is like, are you done? Are you ready for me to take charge? Are you done trying to figure this out? Because I'm here waiting for you to stop.
Right.
And it's so peaceful. It doesn't mean anything has changed. And I'm like, wait. Okay, God has this. God has this. So what am I? So that level of humility, my faith absolutely was the staple for me. But just like I said, I don't know if I said it on the podcast yet, me studying mindset, which is actually reprogramming your brain, how you think, because we get so much negative imagery and messaging from ourselves,
right?
And, naturally from the world on a day-to-day basis. And the mindset shift has been major for me. And because of that, I was able to create this book. God put the stories in me. And I really believe in the book, it's over 100 short stories, but throughout the book, there's a lot of, in the bold text, it's encouragement from me saying, keep going. I know it's hard. I'm honoring that it's hard. I'm not saying it's not hard, but I'm saying after you've gotten down, it's time. It's
to
time
get up,
to keep moving. Yeah, and it's time because, unfortunately, I would hear so many stories of people who had divorced even years ago, and they were stuck in that woe is me space. And once again, I'm not discounting what happened to you, but you're still here. God has a plan for you.
Right.
But if you're turned around facing what happened, then how can you move towards what he has?
Yeah.
You just can't do it.
That's a wonderful way to put that.
Yeah. So actually someone told me a story of someone, I believe her divorce had been over 10 years, and how she was really stuck in that space. And I never wrote poetry, but in this book I started writing poetry for some reason. That's why I say God really, I didn't just sit down and write it. Their stories started formulating in my head until I had to even pull over and just write, because I was like, oh Lord, I can't get this out of my head. But it was a story for that woman who was stuck in that space of saying, I know it's hard. I know, and I'm not saying it isn't. But you've given this years. And now it's time. Get your life. And get going.
Right. You've given this years. It's time to give to another area of your life.
Yeah, because we can get fixated with what the other person is doing. And the irony is you can get in that space and really not want them back, but just be so wrapped up in how you were done wrong.
Yes.
Yes.
I was, you know what, because I was reading about one person and one story, and the person was really hurt. I can't remember the details, and and she was saying she wasn't sure if she even really loved him anymore, or if she still really wanted him anymore, but she was so hurt. Right. And I remember personally being really, I was thinking about wanting to break up with someone because I wasn't happy. And then they did something to hurt me. And I was so caught up in what they did, I forgot that I don't even want this person anymore. I mean, that totally like left me. I'm still wanting to be with this person based on they hurt me. And I'm focused on that, trying to undo this hurt and still be with this person. I mean, that's how, for me, that was a warped way for me to think. And so I think I thought about that when I was reading that part of the story. You know, it's just, we can get caught up, I think, as women, or maybe men too, but we can get caught up in the pain and the hurt and not really, and forget, well, is this even what I really want? Do I really want this? And I might not. Right.
Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. And it's, everything in life is about our own journey. And what you want to do moving forward with your life. And a lot of times in my own personal journey, I've had outside talking in my ear who love me and care about me, but they'll be concerned that what they see going on in my divorce, they feel as if that's not fair. How could you allow that? And I'm like, you know, I've got it, because, you know, that's the other thing. There's other components too, like your children. That has been my anchor and everything. And I think for a lot of people who are divorcing, just as much as possible, my kids are already, you know, if you put yourself in their shoes, they're already split in 2 homes now. Okay, so that is major. Yeah. And so I don't want to add them seeing mommy and daddy arguing, or whatever I can. So, you have to look at your end goal, because after this divorce process, you know, the other thing is, for me, we're still a family.
Right.
We're always family.
Always.
Yeah, we're a family in a different shape, but we are still a family. And after the attorneys go away, after these things, so you have to be mindful of that. And I tell my kids all the time that mommy and daddy love them, but mommy and daddy have a new relationship. And you guys are the love glue that holds us together as a family forever. And my kids are young, so I have to break it down in kid terms for them in bite-sized pieces, because I couldn't just say we're getting a divorce, because in the beginning they would have been like, what is that? You know, they don't.
But you know,
they don't understand that.
When you said the love glue, I was thinking that is really true, because let's say that you didn't have children and you divorce. More than likely, you and your soon-to-be ex-husband go your separate ways and live each other's life, maybe not even seeing or talking to each other again. But when you have children, they are the glue that keeps you connected as a family. So that's a true statement.
Yeah. And whatever you can do, my ex and I have been at my son's basketball games and sitting together. He and his mother were just at a family function, because to me, we haven't reached that point yet where new partners are involved. But I've even had that discussion with him. Let's talk about it when it happens, because I'm not in that space. We're getting a divorce, so clearly life is going to move on for both of us in that way. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to physically hurt when I first see it.
Right.
But my goal is to embrace that person. That person is going to be a part of my kids' lives.
Yes.
You know, and part of, my ex's life. So
you want it to be healthy.
I want it to be healthy. And to me, that's the most unfortunate part about divorce, is that we don't recognize that the way that our spouse is living, is doing, that doesn't mean just if they're asking for things that are not conducive to your life, to just go ahead and let your standards down. But as far as getting them riled up and upset and communicating in a bad way, they are over your children. They are the caregivers. They are the influencer over your children's lives.
Uh-huh.
I want them to be their best.
Right.
In that way.
Yes. Uh-huh.
I mean, that doesn't mean I don't want to, I'm working out and I'm not like happy that, okay, you see what you missed out. Of course, you have that healthy type of energy.
Uh-huh.
But as far as anything bad happening to you, or just even your mental state, they're influencing your children.
Right.
So it's time that we get behind that type of thinking, because that affects your children. And then your children come back to you as far as whatever your spouse said or did. Mm-hmm. So it's things we have to work through to be the best for them.
You mentioned mindset, changing your mindset. What was that? What did that look like? And were you always this evolved?
No. My mindset journey, which is why I say that God really had his hands on me, it actually started at the end of my marriage, at the end of the 7 years, where I was working from home. My ex, he had his own office. So I was at home a lot. So while I was working from home, I started watching like Tony Robbins videos. Uh-huh. And, if anyone knows Tony Robbins, you're not going to just listen to him and not be inspired, to live better and be better. He mentioned someone who influenced him, Jim Rohn. And that's the amazing thing about the internet. Is people have spent thousands of dollars on seminars and things to go in person. And now these things are free on the internet.
Right.
It's like going to school if you decide to do that. I'm a podcast junkie and I've learned so much. And what I was finding is people who were successful in business, even multimillionaires, the thing that I was drawn to was their ethics, being true and living in excellence. And I was like, wow, these principles that they're living by are amazing. Giving to charity, being philanthropic. It just, these things I just really connected and resonated with them. And so I would listen to different people's stories. And then also I was in a car that was a quote unquote step down from the car I had in marriage, but it had satellite radio. Yeah. So that's another thing that God was doing for me. Instead of me looking at it as me not having what I had, I was able to see like, oh, he gave me this, because my fancy, quote unquote, fancier car didn't have the satellite radio. So I was in this car, and then I turned it to Joel Osteen and I never turned it. So I was, I know people have different viewpoints of Joel Osteen, but at the very least, he uplifts. And I was getting a daily dose of that when I was in a space in the end of my marriage that wasn't uplifting. So I was being filled every day.
Fed, yeah.
It was a beautiful thing. Another thing that I did, so I would listen to Joel Osteen, T.D. Jakes. I did this while I was exercising, walking, which is a great combination. Yeah. I was listening to audiobooks. I was listening sometimes in the car to comedy and just laughing and not thinking about the painful breakdown that was happening. So, of course, you have to deal with those things, and everyone has their different ways. But we don't always feel when we're pouring out, and I was being filled, and I think that I was pretty empty, which is why I was able to fill up in this way.
Right.
And fill up in a way that was positive, because that's the other thing, Adrian. You can fill up in a broken space, but you can fill up with, he did this, well, you need to do that. From,
with resentment, right.
Negativity.
Right.
You can feel in a different way. But those were the ways that I chose to feel.
Yes. And in addition to filling up with positivity, it sounds like you were also filling up with a lot of gratitude, which is, huge. When we're going through something and then you saw the blessings and was grateful for them, even though maybe in the context of what they're happening in, you might have wanted to be in a different space, but that was where you were taking shape to where you are now.
Yeah. And it gave me also, I mentioned before how I felt very mechanical with my children when I was in my marriage, because I was so exhausted. It gave me a whole different relationship with them, which I created a kid's book about mindset, Mommy Ninja, from this. Because what I saw happening is I would break these mindset principles down in bite-sized pieces on a level that they could understand, and then get their feedback on it. So I have exposed them to a lot of things because of that and the gratitude. And I'm so thankful for that, because I don't believe that I would have gone in that way, in that direction, because I wouldn't have had to. So I don't know that I would have had these experiences not happen for me. And it's just, I'm thankful, of course, just like myself, having experiences that aren't so good with divorce. I won't ever act as if it's all sugar and spice. I won't act like that.
Yeah.
It's not the same for my kids either. This is a major life shift, but I would honestly say that this has been the healthiest for all of us. And I'm really thankful for these blessings with them as well. It's just given me a whole new relationship all around. And
your book, the short stories have names at the end. So those are names that you came up with, or I thought they were actual people. And one of them, her name is Nah, like, and then there's like 5 or 6 A's.
Right. That actually is really really funny. The first person to read my book before it was completed was one of my cousins, who's a writer as well. And she is single. So she read the stories and she said, this is really, an interesting perspective. And she said, I think that it would be great if you could put the people's names and ages of the stories. And I said, well, it probably would be, but I can't do that. I can't reveal my sources. So after she said that I honestly, that's why I keep saying God gave me every inspiration with these things. So each one is like a little comedic undertone to the story. I'm like, divorce, it can be heavy. It's all in our perspective on things. So what I wanted was an uplifting tone to the book, but at the same time to honor, what's going on with emotions and experiences.
Yes. Yeah. And honestly, I feel that it's a book that most people, if they're experiencing heartache, it could be from a death of a spouse or even a family member, or it could be, a breakup of a relationship, that a lot of the feelings and the experiences were things that I could relate to. If I just look back over my past, there were nuggets of, I've felt like that before. I've had that kind of experience before. So I think it's a really relatable book, certainly for someone experiencing a divorce. You know, we've all had heartache. So I think it's a lovely book.
Thank you. Thank you. I've had people who have not been married who have told me that what you said, where they're connecting with the stories and as far as their relationship or relationships that they've had.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah. I think the financial part is really interesting. I don't think enough about that when I think about divorce, but I think money plays in different ways. It plays into self-worth for men and women in different ways. So I'm glad that you're highlighting that.
Yeah. And you know, also the other thing that I wanted to include in there is, I think there's a misconception that it's like always the woman who's experiencing that, but there's stories from men where the wife is the breadwinner.
Right.
So
definitely.
And just how they feel on both ends, how she feels and how he feels. There's different types of stories with that, because that's what I mean. It's divorce is not that little box. It's just as varied and dimensional as our marriages are. So, and relationships are. So, absolutely, it doesn't just fit one way.
Do you have, since you've written this book and you've talked to so many different people, do you have people who get in touch with you just for advice about how to navigate? Yeah.
And you know what? I find myself saying, Barbie, stop, because I feel like I'm talking and I'm saying too much a lot of times, because now I feel like people ask me. I had someone not too long ago who, a friend who's been with his girlfriend for years. They have a child together, and he said, "You've been through this. What do you think, if I should get married or not?" He said, "People keep getting divorced." And I said, well, actually two, and they were both men that talked to me that were my friends in regards to the same thing. And I said, you cannot go by what is happening around you as an indicator of what's going to happen in your relationship. You have to be connected with what is happening with you and your partner and what the two of you want. And, you know, the other thing is, what I found out in marriage to be true is, it's not the textbook. It's not he should have this and do this, she should have this and do this. If that doesn't work for you, if you know you have a different relationship with money, or if you have a different relationship with what makes you feel comfortable and safe with your partnership that works, then that's what you have to honor, and that's what you need to convey to your partner. I can't look at 10 marriages around me that didn't work, or 10 that did, and think that this means mine will.
Right.
That's not how it works.
Right. No.
It's not how it works. So in this, you know, in a wonderful way, that shouldn't be the deterrent for you, because you're seeing this, that it won't work, because it didn't happen for your parents. Because I actually did a video series with my co-creator, Natalie Lamb. It's called Feeling, Healing, and Growing Through Divorce. And I was learning. I'm the host. We both did it together, but Natalie is the relationship life coach expert who's seen couples for over 20 years. So I learned a lot through that video series, and that was actually her point, that said, even if your mother and father were married for all this time, you're not them.
Right.
So, you know, not to dissuade you and say it won't work for you, but she was saying that don't let that be the deterrent of it won't work, because it didn't work.
Right.
Parents,
Right.
or
Where
because everyone's makeup is different.
is that video series available online for people to go and watch?
Yes, it will be on BarbieBaptisteGardner.com.
Uh-huh.
Everything. So, Adrian, this whole experience for me, self-publishing, creating a book,
Sure.
this is all brand new.
Right.
And now on this end, I'm like, oh, this is all brand new. The whole the whole setup of things. So yes, that should be, I'm not sure when the podcast comes out, but that is
it'll
that's
be
happening.
online soon. It'll be online very soon. I'm
Okay.
asking. I'm asking
Well,
the video series. Well, are you saying it'll be online very soon?
yes.
Okay.
Yes.
On your website.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Well, I am so grateful. Before we close, I like to ask listeners for healing questions. They're spiritual related questions if you're up to it. So
Absolutely.
Okay. So how would you describe your knowing or perception of God?
That's a great question. See, for me, there's so many things.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was saved right out of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Right before I went to, I can't remember if it was my first year of college. It was between high school and college. So there's so many things for me. I mean, I had the experience of speaking in tongues, the Holy Ghost,
Mm-hmm.
as my own thing for myself. But oh my God, Adrian, there's so many things. My relationship with my father, it wasn't. He's no longer here, but for him, he turned his life around. And before that happened, there was heavy prayer. There was me going to the altar. So I truly believe that God was all in that.
Mm-hmm.
And he turned his life around, which turned my life around and my family's life around. Before, that's like another way of mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And before I was even set mindset, I thank God that he showed me that man before he left.
Right.
As opposed to saying, did you change him and then he's gone?
Right.
You know,
right.
there's different ways that you can see it. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm so thankful for that. And specifically to date in my own divorce journey, during this time, when I was going through my divorce originally, how I told you I started over in every way. I worked in film and television.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as I graduated from college, I started with that.
Mm-hmm.
But now, when I was going through my divorce, I reconnected with my union, rejoined it. So I started working in that capacity again. But when I started as like a production assistant.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so humbling for me. And at that point, I'm 47. So I was in my 40s. And instead of it being something that was depressing, I was so excited that I was Barbie again. You know, that was happening.
Mm-hmm.
So I know. And then people who knew each other in different spaces would see me and they'd say, "You look great. What are you doing?" But they meant, I feel they meant energetically,
yeah, my
disposition. And that was God.
Mm-hmm.
That was God. You know, in the very end of my book, when I give acknowledgments, I say something to God, and it's so funny. I read this whole book. The book is on audio, also on Audible,
mm-hmm.
and I read the entire book, and I was fine. And when I got to the acknowledgments, I totally broke down and started crying. I said, I can do this. I can do this, because, like I said, I never want to act like divorce is easy. But for me, I was broken down
mm-hmm.
and built back up.
Right.
And that was because of God.
Mm-hmm.
But the thing is, you have to allow God. We're still in control as far as that happens. You have to allow God to do what he's going to do in your life.
Right.
So giving all honor to God, and I thank him all the time for this mindset. I thank him for the ability to learn, and it's still something I'm learning, to be a diffuser, so that even if my ex, we all have different journeys. If I can learn to be a diffuser, then we're not arguing. I said it does take two people,
right,
to keep the argument going. And if I can learn that I can be humbled, and it doesn't matter what things look like to the world, but God has me on this path,
right,
then things that come at me, other than even in my divorce and me starting over and people thinking they know you, and just, that's God.
Right.
It's
right,
God,
right.
how you see yourself and where you're going,
right.
and how you allow that to take place. Not getting caught up.
Right, right. And what's not real and not God.
Right.
What do you think God calls you to do for yourself and others through your work?
I definitely believe that I have a calling to inspire. And when my favorite thing to do in the car is I call it unplugging to plug in, where I'll put my earplugs on and I'll talk to God, and it just looks like I'm on the phone, but I'm not plugged into the phone or anything else. And I just have a conversation. I love doing that. And so many times I feel, even as women, there's the excuse of feeling bad, or the guilt of when we put attention on ourselves, when you treat yourselves, when you do these things for yourselves, because we're such caregivers naturally. And I believe that's how God made us. But we're also supposed to do that for ourselves. And like, you can't change who you are made up to be, but you can change how you channel these things and making it healthier.
Right.
And an example of that for myself is, I feel that one of the things that I naturally am is a pleaser type person, which a lot of women are. But what I'm learning to do is to the same pleaser tactics that I would show to another person or a partner, or even my children, I find myself doing, I'm learning to do it for myself. And I think that's what we have to learn to do. And I feel that that is one thing that God is teaching me. Be good to you, Barbie. Do that for you. I want you to walk through this mall, and as much as you want to look for your children, you look for you. You're not allowed. And it's small things like that.
Right.
That you find yourself constantly doing, because what happens is we get depleted as women, as moms, as girlfriends, fiancés. We get depleted, and really we're in charge of that. Because really, a lot of times no one is asking you, and if they are asking you, you can say no.
Right.
No, it's my time.
Right. Well, this next question, you've already shared some, but another one might come to mind. Tell me about a time when you had a miracle or a blessing that you knew was totally God, like it was nothing else. You had nothing to do with this coming about or this happening.
Oh, everything, because I am living in a state of gratitude. I really am. I try to consistently. I do feel like everything is a blessing from God. Like, even being here, being able to speak with you, and hopefully inspiring people on my Instagram account, when I'm able to, write a message and someone connects with it, and I see that it helps someone.
Yeah.
Those all selfishly fulfilling, because I think that a lot of times when we are in a creative space or entrepreneurs, we feel as if, we question like, okay, is this just in my head, or am I supposed to be doing these things?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, my journey, I didn't understand why things were happening the way they did, and it just felt very disconnected. And I think that's the extreme blessing from God. When He connects in a huge way.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give you one example. Okay, see, I told you it might take me a second. When I wrote the book,
Mm-hmm.
I called Natalie, the co-creator for Feeling, Healing, and Growing Through Divorce. I called her and I said, could you help me to create like an hour-long video of questions from people who are experiencing divorce, to give feedback,
Mm-hmm.
like if they could speak to someone like you. And she said, whatever you need. For her to say that was amazing because my book wasn't even done yet, and she just did that because she's a lovely person, a woman of God, and like my sister. So she said that. So by the time I got questions from outside people going through divorce and then inputted more questions, it was so long and massive. It was pages of questions. I said, this is more than just a little hour-long free video that hopefully people will buy my book and I'm going to give them this video.
Uh-huh.
I said, this is kind of like a course or something to help. And she said, whatever you need. And I count that as an absolute blessing because what it ended up being was 7.5 hours. They're all broken up into like 1 hour modules, 7.5 hours, and then an additional hour, bonus hour that we give them. But it ended up being a whole nother program
than you had
that
planned.
I didn't sit down and say, how can I create this? That came from what I just told you. So that is absolutely God. Yes. And there is so much information to help someone who is saying, okay, now I'm in this space. What do I do in this space?
Yeah.
And the other beautiful part about it is I've met people or know people who, for example, have one custody schedule with their children. So they're not experiencing, they might have full custody. But the thing that happens with divorce is things change. So in the matter of a year or two, now they have a different schedule. So they were not dealing with the separation from their children, that type of anxiety and what's happening with them and all of that. And now they are. You have all of these different things that at one point you might not be dealing with, but another point you will. And to be able to speak to someone who's experienced divorce and who has also talked to couples who've experienced this for over 20 years, that's a blessing. So.
And also what I was getting from what you were saying is that the blessing that came to you that was all God, it was internal also. I mean, I was thinking how, God works from within us. We don't know sometimes what's inside of us that God has put there and is bringing out through us. And it's not necessarily from some external place. It's coming from within. Right. That was really enlightening what you just shared. So thank you. So I see you. I usually ask folks if they're a healer or a seeker. I kind of see you as both. How do you see yourself as a healer or as a seeker?
I feel like during that video series that I was just discussing, I definitely dealt with what you're saying right now, this question, because Natalie is a counselor. So I felt a lot of times she would stop me when I was saying, you just got to move on. And she said, well, okay, well, hold on. So that's where I say I learned, you honor your emotions, honor what happened, because I'm in a different space now. So I definitely receive that. I would say I am part of both, because I've learned to go back to that initial feeling, where there is that hurt. I wouldn't say that I am a healer only exclusively, because I feel more like a coach, an encourager, someone who will pat your back while you're crying. And then when you're done, I'm there and I'm saying, just like that trainer when we're working out that we might hate. Right. They're going to get us to where we want to go.
Right. Absolutely.
Like it's time to come on. Do you need some water? Okay, come on. Like, let's go.
Well, so before we close, I want you to please let folks know how to get in touch with you, how to purchase your book. And you mentioned 3 moms in the beginning of the book, and if you could just really share about that for a moment too.
Yes, thank you. My 3 moms, my natural mother, Taurus Baptiste, and my mother is currently a retired principal. So having a daughter who's an entrepreneur is definitely a different thing that she has to
wrap her mind around.
Well, she doesn't have to, but she does. She accepts who I am. And then my other mother, Barbara Arnold, who I was actually named after. My name is not Barbara, but I was named after my Aunt Barbara. And she's also retired, and I'd like to think of her as my little Spitfire. She's, professional, but she's still got that sass to her. And then my amazing Aunt Marguerite Smith, and she's no longer with me. But during my entrepreneurial journey, it's always beautiful if you can have someone who can connect and encourage you. And she was always an encourager. And even though all 3 of them were in academics, in school principals, she always encouraged me, whatever I was doing as an entrepreneur, real estate, whatever. And she's like, Barbie, I don't quite understand, but I'm just so inspired by you. And I was like, so to hear that encouragement. But the 3 of them were the African American sisters and all principals for Los Angeles Unified School District. So it was like, wow, even though they are not quote unquote entrepreneurs, they broke the mold.
Right, they're trailblazers.
Being the first ones. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
So I wanted to pay tribute to them. So thank you, friends.
Absolutely. And so how can everyone purchase the book?
Well, I'm on Amazon. So if they go to Amazon.com, He Loved Me, I Love Me More is the book. And my website, BarbieBaptisteGardner.com. I'm not sure if they'll link for the book. There might be an Amazon link as well, but that's where the video series will be available.
Okay, and your contact information is on the website. Yes.
Yes, and also I am on the on Instagram as Mommy Sense. It's mommy _ the word sense, SENSE. It's spelled like that on Instagram, but it's actually $2 for sense, because I wanted to honor moms and women as entrepreneurs, and because I have such a passion for business. So that's another platform that I have. Yes.
Okay. So Instagram is at Mommy Sense. Is that right?
It's mommy _ sense.
Okay.
SENSE.
Okay.
MOMMY_SENSE.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much. This has been so wonderful. I really appreciate this. I've enjoyed it.
Likewise. Thank you, Adrienne. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us. Remember, you can listen to all of our episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our podcast YouTube channel. Remember also to like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and send me that email at letstarthealingpodcast@gmail.com. Let's start healing.